lot of people ask me questions about cars, and it's possibly because they know I'm a car guy and I'm also a money guy. And these two things are often at odds because cars are a ridiculous waste of money, but you still want to have a cool car and you like to get around because this is America, right? So I've been a car guy and a motorcycle guy since I was of legal driving age, or maybe even before that, as if you check my juvenile record in Canada, there may have been some incidents of before legal driving age. So it's a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and I get a lot of questions about it, including ones like this from a gentleman named Curtis. Mr. Mustache, in 2015, I purchased a brand new Subaru Forester for $23,000 with a loan, but thanks to finding Triple M, I've paid it off early. I'm currently doing a 80 mile per day commute, but I'm soon moving to within 2 miles of work, and then I'll be driving less than 5,000 miles per year. So should I keep this paid off car? So it's a really, really common question. People have this imaginary thing in their mind where like a paid off car is different than one where you still have a loan. There's really no difference. What really matters is how much money is the car worth and how much is it tying up if you're using it. So the quick answer for Curtis is yes, you should sell that car. No, you should not keep it because it's still worth $15,000 to $20,000, and that's too much for anybody to have tied up in a car unless they're already quite wealthy. Turns out the ideal range for a car, if you don't want to be getting into something that requires a lot of maintenance, is something between $5,000 and $10,000. It's kind of a sweet spot where you can still have a fairly new, efficient, reliable, safe car that holds 5 passengers and has a hatchback and everything, but it's not so new that you're wasting all your money. There's still some fun to be had in the higher ranks of cars, but I would encourage you to keep that reserved until you're at least a millionaire because, there's Teslas and all these neat cars out there, but there's no need to play games with expensive cars when you're still trying to make yourself wealthy enough to be able to have your own free time. So there's hundreds of cars available in the US market, and most of them are stupid choices. They're all either giant, overpowered, inefficient, unreliable. Luckily, there's some pretty good organizations that do a lot of research, including Consumer Reports and Phil Edmonston's Lemonade organization, and they collect feedback from millions of readers and viewers and stuff like that and figure out which cars are actually worth keeping. So I take a look at those every few years, and then I scrape off all the cars and trucks that are stupid choices for other reasons and distill it down into reasonable choices for mustachians. What that really means is you want a car that is 5-door hatchback, 4-cylinder engine, so it's not just wasting fuel, and among the top reliable and fuel-efficient things in its class. And these are really no compromise cars because they're still good handling, plenty fast cars for use anywhere other than a racetrack. And what that boils down to here in 2019 is just these 6 cars. I kind of narrowed it down, and I'll put up a graphic here. The 2009 or newer Toyota Matrix, which is actually the same as a Toyota Corolla with just a different body. Either of those two will do, but I recommend the Matrix. The 2009 or newer Mazda 3 is another great choice. 2011 Kia Soul, which is really cheap on the used market. Not quite as good in the hatchback capacity, but if you don't need a lot of cargo, check those out because they have high reliability ratings. The Prius is a perennial choice, and an unintuitive cousin to that thing is the Lexus CT200. That's actually the same car, but rebranded as a Lexus and with nicer looking materials and body. If you don't want to be seen in a Prius, you can have a Lexus that still gets 40 plus miles a gallon, and they're surprisingly cheap. If you really, really need off-road 4-wheel drive capability, then the RAV4 is the best choice by Toyota in that range. And finally, if you're driving mostly within cities and not doing a lot of cross-country road tripping, then it turns out the car that I have, which is a Nissan Leaf, is turning out to be a good, reliable choice. And they have very low resale value, not because they're depreciating quickly, but because there's a huge tax credit that subsidized these cars up until this year. So you're able to get a almost new Leaf at the price of a much older gasoline car. And then your fuel is almost free and your maintenance is almost free. And these cars are really a blast to drive. Much more fun than a more expensive gas car because the acceleration is fast, immediate. They have a low center of gravity, so they handle like a sports car actually, especially if you get the Nissan Leaf SV or higher model because that comes with wider tires and bigger wheels. So any of these 6 cars are pretty good. But the next question is, how can we find these cars at these relatively low prices? So we're going to go into that with these little special screen capture parts of the video that I've made for you. All right, so lesson number 1 is to find out how much you should really be paying for a used car, or how much you should expect to get for your own used car when you're selling it on the private market, since we don't use dealerships here when we're Mustachians. So I recommend a little sub-page of the Kelley Blue Book website, which is kbb.com/what's my car worth. So when you open this up, it's fairly it can be fairly bullshitty with ads, and they don't let you use it with an ad blocker, but it's worth getting through that anyway. And let's just use a quick example where we want to look up the value of a 2011 Toyota Prius. So 2011 Toyota Prius, and then mileage. I always advise putting something around 100,000 miles as a good baseline for a medium old car like this. It's good to not buy a car with many more miles than that, and so this is kind of in the mid-range of that type of use. All right, so then it makes you answer more questions. You want the 2, 1, 3. The Prius, generally the 3 is the kind of hatchback that you're familiar with from seeing all over on the roads. You click next. The equipment doesn't really make much difference in your price. And whoo, look at these messy ads. All right, price with standard equipment. Color doesn't really matter, so you just pick that. Notice how crappy this website is to use, but just grin and bear it. And what's your vehicle's condition? I usually pick very good to make sure your expectations are not unrealistically cheap when you're doing the shopping. Now it's doing some searching. And then see on these tabs, make sure you pick private party value, because nobody should ever trade in a car, nor should they accept an instant cash offer for the car. So here's our real answer. The private party value of a 2011 Prius with 100,000 miles is somewhere in this range, $7,280 to $9,400. They throw you in the middle of $8,300. And you write that down, and you look this up for any cars that you're interested in buying or selling, and then you only have to use this web page once, and that's going to be your target for what kind of stuff you should expect in the marketplace. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, when I look on Craigslist or whatever the car dealer ads, the prices are much higher than, so how do I get this price that looks so good in Kelley Blue Book? The answer is these are based on actual sales, whereas what you see on Craigslist and the dealer stuff is the asking price. And the first thing you need to know about cars, especially used cars, is the asking price is just a fictitious thing, and you don't have to pay what they're asking. So we're going to go on to Craigslist and see what we can find in this price range now. We are now going to search on Craigslist for a 2011 and newer Prius and see how it comes out. So I happen to live in Colorado, so I use the Denver Craigslist, denver.craigslist.org. And we start with the search box. I'm going to say Toyota Prius. And then once you get the initial search, you can make it a little more efficient by changing some of this stuff on the side. First of all, search titles only, because anybody who's too lazy to put what they're selling into the title is someone you don't want to do business with. Then make sure you enable has image for that same reason. Then you can put the model year, also important. For the Prius, I would suggest that 2010 to 2015 is the range you want to be looking for, because it did a major update in the year 2010, and that's worth catching that update instead of going for 2009 if you're looking for a newish quality car. And then finally, we update the search. Notice there's different stuff here. And then you can sort it by the price, ascending, and that way you're looking at the cheapest cars that meet your criteria first. And in Craigslist, there's an interesting phenomenon where what you pay for is not necessarily what you get, because a lot of times wealthier people will be selling, just kind of dumping stuff at a low price, and you'll get better values if you make sure you at least consider the lower price options. Like, for example, here's somebody selling a $4,300 Prius. We can assume that's, in rough condition. Oh yeah, look at that. It's poorly spelled. rebuilt title, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, needs some work. But for 126,000 miles, if you are a bit of a do-it-yourselfer, this could be the best deal on Craigslist. And anyway, we're not going to look at every single listing, but you scroll your way through, find ones that you like. You can use this little special X if you see dealers spamming with multiple copies of the same car. That makes it easier to contain the listings and easier to scroll through and show it to your partner or whatever once you've got some options. And then, just click through, make yourself a nice list, and try to judge people's photography and their grammar and meticulousness, because strangely enough, I have found that after many, many years of working on Craigslist, the type of person who makes a good Craigslist ad is also the type of person who takes good care of their stuff, especially their cars, and they're more pleasurable to deal with because they're going to have, for example, the title in hand, and they'll have all the parts of the car, and they won't have left it sitting, in some crappy junkyard. They usually keep it inside in a garage. So it's an interesting social experiment, buying stuff from Craigslist. So what you want to find is nerdy, meticulous people who are also pretty wealthy, and then have really polite, respectful dealings with them, so everyone's happy to have done business with each other, and then you end up with the best deal on a really reliable car. So good luck. And just to compare from the last thing, we found a target price of cars at around $8,300, and you can see that in the 2011 range we are right in that same band. So it should be pretty easy to match what Kelley Blue Book is telling us we can get a used Prius for. And this happens with every used car if you just search in the right method. So hopefully that sums up the answer for Curtis and everybody else who's thinking about their car strategy in the coming year. It's pretty easy to sell a car on Craigslist as long as you photograph it and describe it well, and it's also really easy to buy a car on Craigslist. Just avoid the common pitfalls of looking for SUVs and trucks. Those things don't do any better than cars. Stick to shopping for cars. If you need extra traction, look into really good snow tires and ignore all-wheel drive. All-wheel drive is kind of a bit of a bullshit marketing invention, except for in the most niche cases. And finally, just don't think of your car as your identity unless you're thinking of it as how to show people that you're smart. Nobody needs a fancy car. Nobody needs to be depending on their car for their sense of self-worth. There's a lot better ways to impress other people, like getting into good physical shape, being nice to people, being relaxed about money. There's 1,000 ways to show off that are better than just buying some expensive shit for yourself and driving it around and wrecking your town. So good luck in your car search, and I will see you out there on your road, hopefully on your bike with the car parked, because you don't really need to drive very much anyway.